Phil has promised. So lunch isn't due until noon. So Phil has promised he's going to fill the time until lunch is ready. So just get comfortable. No. But Phil Dieke, he's from Southwest Missouri originally, and he started working for a Methodist church in Dallas and ended up in Perkins School of Theology in Dallas. So he has a Master's of Divinity, and he found his way into the Houses of Hope project that I hope you'll talk about today. Thank you.
Yeah.
So please give it up for Phil Dieke.
Yeah, so Reverend Phil Dieke, I am a United Methodist clergy person who lives in Dallas, and I work at a Presbyterian institution in Austin. So every time I introduce myself, there's a lot of explaining to do. People get very confused by what all's going on. And I'm in a disciple church, which this is my first time preaching in a disciple church, so have grace with me.
If you have problems, we'll help you along.
Okay, perfect. That's helpful. That's helpful. I am thrilled to be here and looking forward to it. Let us, we'll turn to the text first before I dive in here. So I invite you to join me on the first reading from the Hebrew Scriptures, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 15 through 19. Hear now these words. Look here. Today I've set before you life and what's good versus death and what's wrong. If you obey the Lord and God's commandments that I'm commanding you right now, by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments, his regulations, and his case laws, then you will live and thrive. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away and you refuse to listen and are so misled, worshiping other gods and serving them, I'm telling you right now that you will definitely die. You will not prolong your life on the fertile land that you are crossing the Jordan River to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth as my witness against you right now. I have set life and death, blessing and curse before you. Now choose life so that you and your descendants will live. That's from the Common English Bible, if it reads differently than what you have in front of you. Our second text is from John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. I'm also going to be reading from the Common English Bible again. And it reads as follows. On the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to celebration. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother said to him, "They don't have any wine." And Jesus replied, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? My time hasn't come yet." His mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby were 6 stone water jars used for the Jewish cleansing ritual, each able to hold about 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some from them and take it to the head waiter." And they did. The head waiter tasted the water that had become wine. He didn't know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The head waiter called the groom and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first. They bring out the second-rate wine only when the guests are drinking freely. You kept the good wine until now." This was the first miraculous sign that Jesus did in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Amen? Great text. So again, Phil Dieke, I'm thrilled to be here and for the opportunity to share. Again, I work at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and my role there is kind of twofold. So I oversee 2 grants that we have through the Lilly Endowment. And the first initiative that I oversee is called the 787 Collective, which is a young adult initiative where we're working to center the voice of young adults and the ongoing faith formation of young adults ecumenically, not just with one denomination, but really kind of across the board. In our initial phase of that grant, we focused on issuing money to churches to be experimental with young adults. And in the phase we're in now, we're really investing in the young people themselves to figure out how to embrace their entrepreneurial spirit and really create new opportunities for young adults in the flourishing of young adult ministries. The other initiative is called Houses of Hope. And through Houses of Hope, we like to say that we try our best to fan the embers of hope in congregations and help congregations discern what is their next most hopeful step. We do this through a variety of storytelling activities and spiritual practices. we'll hear more about this here shortly. So I have to confess, again, not only is this my first time in a Disciples of Christ Church preaching, but I'm also not really a preaching pastor. I never really have been. I've always been a bigger fan of teaching. And not to say that I don't preach fairly regularly. I still do some. But I just have never felt that call to stand up in a pulpit and preach 50 weeks out of the year. So to all of you who do, God bless you. I have such respect for those who do it regularly and just for the pulpit in general. I feel like it's such a holy place is a great way to put it. That's exactly right. It's such a holy place. And what other time in society does somebody get to stand up and for 15, 20 minutes talk and get undivided attention from people? It's just in the attention economy that we find ourselves in, it truly is a privilege, and I hold it with great respect. So I come to preach this morning, but just know that I'm a teacher at heart. So if my sermon ends up feeling a little bit more like teaching, that may be why it feels that way. So because I love to teach so much, I typically start with a warm-up that I do with when I'm teaching or facilitating, something that's going to get the conversation flowing a little bit. And so even though this is a sermon, I'm going to do a little warm-up here with y'all too. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to turn to a neighbor and just share your answer to your question. It's a very simple question, and yet very profound as well. So are you ready? Very, very simple question here. What's your favorite citrus fruit? So let it soak in for a second, and then turn to a neighbor, find a friend nearby. What's your favorite citrus fruit? And here's a caveat. If you could only have this one citrus fruit you could only have one citrus fruit for the rest of your life, what would you choose? You only get one. So citrus fruits, again, just as a reminder, lemons, limes, tangerine, clementine, grapefruit, oranges, those are our citrus fruits. So if you only get one citrus fruit for the rest of your life, what would it be? Discuss.
Orange. I bet you nobody says kumquat.
No one has said kumquat to me. That is an accurate statement. Yes. So I use this question quite often, and it's such a simple question, but I end up finding all kinds of fantastic things about people and what their preferences are based on this simple question. So this came up recently at our dinner table at our house. We had some friends over for dinner, and my mom happened to be in town, and so we were sharing a meal, and I think we ran out of lime, was what it was. And then, of course, this question sparked in my mind, and I asked everybody around the table, and we had this incredible conversation where we began to share why our citrus fruit was our chosen one, and it actually took us back reflecting on all these great stories. So, for instance, my daughter, who's now 9, when she was 18 months, we had this great video of the first time she tried a lime. If you've ever seen those, right, when kids face just like the most terrible face they can ever make, trying a lime for the first time. And we ended up having such gratitude for something so simple, right? There was just immense gratitude for the whatever citrus fruit that we chose. And along with that, it became this like mourning, right? Of, if I could only have oranges, well then I wouldn't be able to have grapefruits. But if I chose grapefruits, then what would I put in my tea? Well, I couldn't squeeze my lemon into a tea. There was just all these like both mourning and sadness as well as this gratitude that we had over something so simple as choosing your favorite citrus fruit, or the citrus fruit you could only have if you had to pick one for the rest of your life. I brought mine, what I would choose. I brought my limes here. I would choose a lime. That would be my choice for if I could only have one. And it's not because that I consume more limes than any other citrus fruits. I probably actually eat more oranges or clementines because I have little kids and they love those little clementine oranges. Or grapefruits even. But the reason I choose a lime is because to me, the role of a lime is not about sole consumption, rather to enhance the flavor and experience of other things. Right? Limes have this ability to bring a little zest to the other foods that you're experiencing and to the drinks that they are added to. Now, maybe the reason I love these is because if you knew how I cooked, I need a lime a lot, right? To spice up what I'm cooking quite regularly here to add a little zest to it. But typically, again, we don't just eat limes. My 6-year-old son loves to eat a lime, so he's got other problems we'll talk about later maybe. But typically we don't just eat a lime. We use a lime to enhance the flavor and experience of other things. Gratitude for something so simple, right? A lime. Something so simple. And yet, around our dining room table, we had profound conversations around something so simple. So this is just a little glimpse of what we do in Houses of Hope. We take things that are so simple, a fruit. We take things that we experience every single day, and we begin to have conversations around the gift of those things, around the gratitude that we experience because of the gift of those things. And we tell stories, and we invite each other to a deeper understanding and deeper knowing of one another. And we practice spiritual gifts together and spiritual practices together. And like a good lime, our work doesn't simply exist for consumption. Rather, we exist to enhance the flavor and experiences of rural congregations. I hope that you'll get a little bit of a sense of this at the work we do in our workshop this afternoon at lunch, so hopefully you can stay to join us. So today, again, I am here to preach as well, so we're going to look to the text. So why talk about limes and gratitude whenever we're actually looking at the wedding at Cana? So the honesty of it is I love a good wedding. As a pastor, I became clergy in 2015, and since 2015, I've been able to officiate 85 weddings, which has been some of the greatest privilege of my entire clergy career. I did youth ministry for a number of years, and college ministry and young adult ministry, and just had the privilege to stand with couples and officiate their weddings, but more than just officiate their weddings, to work with them beforehand, and then to see them go on and build families, and to really create deep relationships through weddings. So I just have a profound love for weddings. I've done backyard weddings. I've done extravagant weddings in Dallas where I'm 100% sure they spent more on flowers than what I make in a year. That was true then. It's pretty sure it's still true now. The UT alumni band was there. I did a wedding in, I've done 2 weddings in New Orleans. One of them I did in the French Quarter, where afterwards we did the second line. Have y'all heard about this? They do a second line. They march around the French Quarter. And so I'm dressed just like this in my clergy regalia here, marching around after the wedding, and there's a guy next to me who's covered fully, head to toe in mirrors. It's the strangest experience I've ever had, but it was lovely. It was so fun. I love a good wedding. And I've been to Cana. Has anybody else been to Cana in Galilee? Let me just tell you, it's nothing remarkable. It's just a little town in in the Galilee region of northern Israel. It's just a little bit north of Nazareth and west of the Sea of Galilee. And last time I was there, I was leading a trip with the church that I worked at. And, we had a full bus full of people. And so me and my colleague were leading this trip. We go to Cana, and we get there, and the common thing to do when you're in Cana, there's a church, because everywhere you go there's a church, right? There's always a story to tell at the church. But we go to this church, and we lead a renewal of vows for about a dozen couples or so that were married on our bus. And it's lovely, right? We're standing in this beautiful church in Israel, in the Galilee region, which Galilee region is just beautiful. And so we lead this wonderful service, and afterwards, we stay around, we hang around, we hear the stories, we listen to our guide. There's a lovely garden there, so we hang out in the garden for a little bit. And then we make our way back to the bus, because when you're on these tours, that's what you do, right? You get off, you see the church, you do your thing, you get back on the bus, you go to the next site. We get back on the bus, and like the good leader that I was, I start counting, right? And then I realize we're one short. And I look down, and one of the oldest gentlemen on our trip was missing. And I looked to his wife, and I said, "Where's Ken?" And she said, "I don't know." I said, "What do you mean you don't know?" She's like, "He said he had something really important he had to go do, and he just peeled off as we were heading back to the bus." I said, okay. So, as the good leader, I just hopped off the bus and started running around the streets of Cana trying to find this gentleman, Ken. After about 10 or 15 minutes of wandering these streets that I know where nothing is other than the church we'd come from, I finally just happened to bump into Ken coming out of this kind of a shop area. And I said, "Ken, where are you? Are you okay?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." I said, "Okay, well, everyone's on the bus. We're waiting for you." He's like, "Well, I had to get something." And I had seen what he had to get because he's wearing it on his head. It's a very bright blue ball cap. And I said, you got that ball cap? He's like, yeah, I did. He was very proud of himself. And I said, "You had to get that right now?" He said, "Sure did." I was walking by and I saw this gentleman who had this shop there, and I thought, "I'm going to go buy that hat." And I said, you realize we're in Cana, right?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "That hat says Jerusalem." He said, "I know." I said, "We're going to Jerusalem tomorrow, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, but I had to get that hat because that guy said he wanted 10 shekels for it. I got him down to 4. Okay, Ken. Well, again, they're waiting for us on the bus. Let's head back. So I get back on the bus and I said, "Well, I found Ken." And she said, "Well, let me just go ahead and tell you. You talked about the miracle at the wedding of Cana. The real miracle is I'm still married to that man." Okay, well. there's that. So I'll just say, I love a good wedding. I've been to Cana. I love Cana. I have a great story in my head of Cana. And in general, this is just a really good story. And if I was teaching this in a Bible study, we'd dive into a whole bunch of things. But right now, what I want you to think about, and what we're going to really focus on here, is those 6 stone water jars. Probably not something you think of a whole lot when you read this text, right? You typically go to Jesus or his mother instructing him or what. But I want you to think about those 6 stone water jars. So if you need to close your eyes, but I'll tell you, so they held 20 to 30 gallons. So picture that in your mind. In my head, when I thought about them originally, they were like these tall jars, like pretty good size. As I went and did some research, they're probably about 2 feet tall, not very tall, and wider than they are tall. But 20 to 30 gallons is quite a bit, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you do with stone jars full of water? Well, the practice of it was to cleanse your hands, right? These were for hospitality. For whenever your guests entered, you provided them water to wash their hands. Now, where this stems from goes all the way back to Leviticus and the purification laws, the purity laws, and there was this desire of, these laws were very practical in nature when they began, right? So I grew up in Southwest Missouri. We grew up on a farm. There were times when I came in from doing farm things where there were things on my hands that I really wanted to wash off before I did things like eat. And so think way back, to just wash your hands was really important, right? There was a purity aspect to washing your hands. And so when we read in Deuteronomy that God has put life and death before you, it's really important to wash your hands. We know now because bacteria comes on those terrible things that I got on my hands when I worked on my farm. So it's really important to wash them. Now we know, obviously now, that soap is also really important in the washing of hands as well. Well, I didn't know whether in the first century soap was real prolific or not. Did a little research. Turned out Rome was really invested in soap. When Rome became very aware of the power of soap to clean, they became prolific producers of soap. So there's a reason this became more of a ritual, right? It's called the Jewish cleansing ritual than the actual practical aspect of cleaning your hands. Again, this is important. We clean our hands. The Levitical code, you clean it because you don't want to die. Choose life over death, right? Don't eat shrimp or shellfish. Why? Because we don't know how to properly refrigerate it. They probably didn't have the terminology to say that then. But there was a very practical aspect to these original laws that then became more ritualized as technology advanced, right? So in Judaism, there still was this idea of we continue to wash our hands as a ritual. Now, why would we do that? It became again, it's very much a hospitality thing. When you walk in, not only do you provide the opportunity to wash, but the Pharisees at the time wanted to emphasize so much that this was just a ritual and not an actual hand washing thing, because again, we have soap. You should be clean anyway. Cleanliness is next to godliness, right? I've heard that before. So you provide the opportunity to wash when you come in because it's a ritual, a practice, something you do regularly to remember from where we have come, but also to pause and give thanks to God. So every time they would walk into a space and the host would provide the opportunity, they would pour water over their hands. So the Pharisees would actually close their hands when they washed theirs in this ritual to just signify that I'm not washing my hands to make my hands clean. I'm washing my hands to purify myself. And so this actually continues in a lot of Jewish traditions. They call it the Net Elit Iadim, which I don't speak Hebrew or read it, so if you do, I apologize. But they pour water over the hands 3 times, and as they do, they say this prayer: Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by his holy commandments and commanded us concerning the washing of hands. What a lovely ritual. Every time they walked in, the host would show hospitality by saying, rinse your hands and say this lovely prayer. That to me is a beautiful example of what it is to show gratitude and use spiritual practices. Very similar to what we do in Houses of Hope. So if you leave here today and all you think of is, every time I go to wash my hands now, I'm going to think of that sermon that guy talked about that one day and take a moment to just give thanks, well then maybe I've done my job here, right? We could just stop there almost. That you wash your hands, you give thanks, take an opportunity to reconnect with God, and maybe give thanks for the fact that we have running water, right? We can turn a faucet on and water comes out. And there's infrastructure that has made that possible, right? And thanks be to God, we do have soap that we can wash that bacteria so we can continue to choose life as well. There's a chance to pause, give thanks to God, reconnect with the God who created the entire universe. That, my friends, in and of itself would be a good day if that's what you walked away with. But we won't stop there. Maybe I will fill up this time, right?
I was gonna say,
We'll
it's
keep-
11:30.
We'll keep
You
going.
gotta
Keep going. Okay. We'll turn to Jesus then, because Jesus is still in this story. So Jesus, when approached with a crisis, and it was a crisis, because again, we just said hospitality is such an important thing. To run out of wine at a wedding celebration was a huge potential for shame upon the hosts. It was a lack of hospitality. And so when this situation arises, the mother of Jesus, Mary, comes to him and says, we have a problem here. To which Jesus intervenes, reluctantly at first, but intervenes by looking around, recognizing those water jars, and taking those jars and doing something miraculous with them. Now we know what those jars represent, right? We just talked through this. Those jars represent God's invitation to life. Those jars represent hospitality. They represent tradition. They represent ritual. And they represent gratitude. So Jesus enters the picture and enters this scenario, this scene that could be very problematic. And he takes these symbols and this age-old tradition and, like a good lime, adds a little zest to them. Jesus acknowledges the beauty of the ritual. He honors the tradition, and then he doubles down on the importance of hospitality and invites all those present and all who continue to read that text to not only choose life, but choose a zesty life. Life filled with celebration and a life filled with abundance. So scholars have gone on to say that those jars filled to the brim, like it says they were, would have made somewhere between 600 and 900 bottles of wine. So when we say life filled with abundance, that's an abundant amount of wine, right? That's not an insignificant amount of wine that was created. What I love so much about what Jesus does here and what the text does is it honors what has been, while also inviting us to consider what might bring some zest, something that might enhance the flavor that's already there. See, I've always known that tacos were good, right? Texas, tacos are good. And then somebody invited me to squirt a lime on top of a taco one time. Game changer. I love fish. Again, Southwest Missouri boy, we fished all the time. I've always loved fish. Black and red fish was one of my favorite. My uncle said one day, have you ever tried squirting a little lime on black and red fish? Amazing. Don't even get me started on key lime pie. In Jesus' first miracle, first miraculous sign here, we have God's example of what life is. Again, God sets life and death before us. We're not called to just choose life, but to choose abundant life. Life filled with gratitude and ritual, life filled with celebration and zest. This story, to me, a lover of limes, is God's invitation to sprinkle a little lime juice on top. And friends, this is what we do through Houses of Hope. We lean into the gifts of hospitality and tradition and ritual that congregations already espouse. Then through storytelling and spiritual practices such as gratitude and hospitality, we seek to fill those jars to the very brim, confident that through filling them as God has called us to, God will indeed do miraculous things through the work that we are called to. God will give us this opportunity to choose life. God will give us the opportunity to make the next most hopeful step. And, more importantly, give us the chance to live that life with a little bit of zest to it. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. I didn't feel that much time.
No. Well, thank you. Are you going to take your limes with you?
I'll leave them there for time being.
Oh, okay.
We can use them for lunch.
Hey, on Bake Zesty. Anyway, thank you so much for your message.